We're going to do things a little bit backwards this time. I'm going to show you what the program does, and then I'm going to give you a quick tour through how it actually does it. So here's what the program does. It creates a set of lines that says who the person is and what they said. I'm ignoring right now both the CID and the email columns. I'm just printing out the name of the person and their comment. Alright, so we're back to our this stuff I'm not going to even deal with. We know what this is. I have the H1 that says people who have commented on my site, and right there. And then I start the PHP, the hard stuff. First thing I do is set up some variables with the access information. For example, my username, my password, my database, and the host. If this looks familiar, it is. You've probably filled these values out already in a PHP file for Drupal or WordPress or both. And since we're creating our own, we're going to do the same thing and do it here. Usually for big applications like that, people just create a PHP file that only holds this kind of information and then imports it, but we're just doing it right in our single program since we're doing something fairly simple. The next thing we have to do is create a connection to MySQL, and I'm creating it as a variable. So far we've been storing in variables things like words or numbers in some cases. In this case, we're saying this is not what we're storing in this box is not a word or a phrase or a string or an integer, but actually a connection, which is a little bit strange. But if you later on do this with files, you'll find the same thing happens. In order to have a handle on which connection you're dealing with, that's actually what this is called. You have to have a handle. The next line is something called error trapping. What it says is that this symbol is not. What it says is this is kind of what we do with, remember, if there's no post, we do actually we do it if there is a post, do the following. But in this case, we're saying if there's nothing in my connection, in other words, if the connection failed, then print out the error so we can see why it's failed and what's going on. But assuming everything is going well, and actually in this case, even if it doesn't go well, it'll continue on, it then tries to create a query. I should mention that we're doing this at a very high level here, and it's not important that you understand the underlying technology for what we're doing here. Later on, if you want to explore SQL in some detail and PHP in some detail, they're actually two different languages. SQL is a query language, a way of interacting with databases. And we're only going to do two kinds of queries, or two queries at all, as part of the lesson in Module 6. But there is a whole language that allows you to do all kinds of complicated reports and join together data from different sources and show results in different kinds of reports and organize those in various ways. We're not going to get into all of that. We're just going to say, okay, here's the SQL query we're going to use, and you'll just have to, I'll explain to you what this says, but you'll just have to accept it on faith that this is a valid SQL query. Query is a weird word because it's kind of a command, right? So it's query suggests it's a question, but it's really it can be used to insert things or completely destroy databases or whatever. You start a new database, you can do just about anything within a SQL query. All right, so what is our query? Our query is select. That is, we want to pull some rows out of there. What do we want to select? We want to select everything. That's every column. Even though we're not going to use them all, we're actually going to pull them in the row. We're going to pull in the CID, the name, the email, and the comment. Even though we're using only two of those four in this particular case, so we're being a little lazy here by pulling them all in. We could just pull in the ones we need. And from which table? Well, the new table that we created, new app. If we wanted to, we could actually pull from since we have all the credentials, we could pull from our comments in WordPress and spit them out here as well, because we could just go to WP comments and pull. It's not the same, they're not the same field names, but if we knew what the field names were, we could pull those out and print them here as well. So that's the query we're going to use. Now, how do we use that query? Well, we say that the results, this box, comes from this function, actually executing the query. So the function is MySQL DB query, and then you have to tell them which database, which we've set up here is ICM Halavey, what your query is, which we've set up right here, the query, and this is actually optional, but I'm leaving it in there, my connection, which we've said we've connected to the database here, so we have to use that connection to get the data. Again, this is error trapping. What if no results come back? If no results come back, we want it to produce an error. Actually, I guess we could just have something echo say, nobody's commented, right? But in this case, we're going to say, what's the error? Chances are, well, we don't know what the error would be, so that's why we have the error trapping there. Otherwise, we're going to continue on. In any case, actually, we're going to continue on. Now, what are those results? Well, the results are still up there on the SQL Server. It's a little funky. Again, you're going to have to take some of this on faith because the details get a little bit complicated, but let me try to give you an idea. You notice that here we have a while loop. This is a pretty standard way of producing comments. So if you can follow the kind of cookie cutter, the recipe here, you don't have to know about what chemicals are changing in the food to know that you cook it for a certain amount of time at a certain temperature. And that's this kind of approach here. So I'm going to try to give you a model that you can follow, and you don't really have to know why it's working as much as it's working, at least at a deeper level. At a more shallow level, let me give you a quick overview. While row equals, now, okay, the first thing you're going to say is, shouldn't this be equals? In this case, no, you really are doing an assignment. You're saying, take whatever's in here and put it in here. Okay, so what this is a little, think of it as kind of like a Pez dispenser. Each time you hit this function, it pops something off the top. So it fetches the next thing off the top, and it puts it right in here. So it just keeps on pushing things into row. Eventually it's going to run out, and row will be empty, and in that case this turns out to be false. So what this does is it says pop off a new row. Remember, rows are each of our records in the database. Pop off a new row and do this with it, and then try again. And if you can, as long as you can do that, keep popping off rows and doing what follows in the while statement. So what follows? Well, in that row, the row is an array. It's a lot like our post array before, and we've got things just like a post in some ways that we can pull out. So we're going to pull out the name, which we have as name in our thing, and a comment, which we have as comment as our field in the database. And then we're going to echo the name with some HTML around it. So we're going to echo it as a paragraph. Notice here that I can actually put name, that is, I can put a variable right in here, right in the string itself, and then say said. And then down here I'm echoing out a block quote of a particular class, so that if I wanted to, I could go in and CSS and fix this up later on. And then I'm going to put the comment in there. So very straightforward. Well, not straightforward maybe, but fairly easy to understand what's going on in here. I pull out those variables from the row, and then I echo them just the same way as I might with a form before. But I do this over and over again as it pops these things off my results. And it kind of pops them out like a Pez dispenser, and that's it. So we've already seen what that does. It produces, no, not that, but this. It pops off one line, and then it pops off the next line, and then it pops off the next line. Since we haven't asked it to order it in any particular order, it's just going to pop them out in random order. We could do something like, from new app, we're going to add to this query, again, using the SQL language, order by name, for example. And if we save this, file save, and then we upload it, we can see what change that has. Watch carefully. Okay, now it's ordered by the name of the person. So we start with an O, start with an S, start with an S. So we've done it. We've alphabetized it by name. And so if we had stored the time when people had made these comments, we could actually order them by the time or something like that. And it's actually very easy to do. In fact, SQL can do it kind of automatically by putting a timestamp on things. We just didn't happen to do it this time. All right, so this is the basics of how to produce these comments. Of course, the next question is, now that we have these comments, how do we put new comments in? And that's what we handle next time. Thanks.